Good afternoon and most welcome. Well, it's a whopping 1400. Will you believe it? 1400 episodes. Hooray! Hooray! Fine. And here we have the marvelous map of Lundby, the county we're in now, situated smack on Hising Island. Thank you very much, Kalle, for participating in this fantastic journey, I would say, maybe exploration. And thank you all listeners and viewers for your patience with the slow pronounced verbs and nouns and adjectives. And thank you all contributors in the material: Rosen, Ian McGilchrist, Barbara Tversky. Who do we have more? We have, of course, the people who are no longer with us: Ludwig Wittgenstein, Martin Heidegger, Merleau-Ponty, Maturana Verala is still around, Maturana. All those that contributed, affordances, Gibson, not to be forgotten, Tony Shimiro, and multiple others not mentioned here.
And we could also mention that the owner of this office is interested in Adorno, so it's material for future.
He's not actually owner,
okay.
He's a renter.
Okay.
The owner is Robin, and say thank you to him as well for lending this office for this tryout.
He's interested in Adorno, so it's a material for future.
Yes, definitely, and Horkheimer. And well, thank you, Gödel, it's very important as well.
Mm-hmm.
And all the researchers and physicists who made that enormous leap that quantum physics was in the 20s. Heisenberg, Bohr, Schrödinger, Dirac, de Broglie, Pauli, and all others. There is a multitude of people that deserves incredible gratitude. I will now continue with the lecture of 1400, and it will be
Malecic.
The article of Aleksandar Malecic, and I have to put in a disclaimer here. There was something wrong with the pages, so there had been a turnover in pages in the presentation. I apologize for that. I organized things in a better system since a month ago, where all pages have numerals, but this is the last one of the old system. But since I went through the different acronyms, and this is one of the problems, the acronym was mentioned before the actual word, but I think I clear that out. And I will continue now on what is page 5 and then skip directly to 7. And from then on, everything is correct. And Robin also has quite magnificent coffee here. Constructivism, in its radical form, denies any ultimate truth, and this is the point at which we should stop playing and get serious and rigorous. Glasesfeld, for instance, is inconsistent when he asks for denial of objective reality, and at the same time suggests, in the form of religious worship, Kant's philosophy as the ultimate approach to ethics. This author is probably among less violent human beings, but pretending that violence doesn't play its role in nature and society won't contribute to our understanding of what is going around us in order to consciously choose our values and behavior. On the other hand, the radical form of constructivism applied to physical reality means that we shall never know, for instance, whether or not we are living in a computer simulation. It is a tiresome and annoying exercise in empty philosophizing and a futile attempt by someone who doesn't understand to deny the right of anyone else to understand or get closer to understanding. Even if humans will never be able to understand everything, that's because our limitations, rather than physical reality being arbitrary. A defeatist and nihilist approach to thinking and doing should be discouraged. It is just plain wrong to insist and still be saying that physical and or societal principles and the universal constructor are whatever we want them to be. Two storylines. This section will have two parallel storylines. In order to allow the reader to compare strengths and weaknesses of Deutsch and Marletto's approaches. And what the author has to say about it. The author is first and foremost interested in understanding the truth and open to critique. We shall add here a few quotes from Deutsch's and Marletto's papers and analyze them. Inevitability of Poincaré recurrence. Both Deutsch and Marletto tend to make metaphysical statements, such as this one, in a part of a sentence, without further explanation why that is obvious. Even though every available theory is in a terrible condition and probably about to be eliminated. Poincare recurrence is an idea that particles inside a box can have all possible states. Including the very unlikely and rare state of every particle in one half of the box. Pragonine disagrees with that. And sees diffusion as inherently irreversible. And asymmetrical in time. This kind of discussion can be only properly addressed by a relevant systems theory. None of the laws in the constructor theoretic formulation use probabilistic statements. For some reason, they claim the monopoly on both constructor theory and how to use it. That is, they are attempting to sneak their opinions into constructor theory and make them inevitable and beyond dogmatic. Traditional collapse theories are also inherently far worse explanations than Everettian quantum theory. By criterion 1, since they neither explain what happens physically between measurements nor what happens during a collapse. This is another example of their hit-and-run style of making metaphysical statements. Each time their approach stumbles, Deutsch and Marletto simply ignore it and move on. Add quotation marks to a problem and it will miraculously vanish. Also a statement that Everetian quantum theory is terrible and other theories are even worse does not sound optimistic and enthusiastic. Between measurements and during a collapse are metaphysical statements meaningless to some other approaches. Thinking within the prevailing conception has led some physicists, including the 1963 Nobel Prize winner Eugene Wigner and the late US-born quantum physicist David Bohm, to conclude that the laws of physics must be tailored to produce biological adaptations in general. This is amazingly erroneous. If it were true, physical theories would have to be patched up with design-bearing additions. In the initial conditions or the laws of motion, or both, and the whole explanatory content of Darwinian evolution would be lost. Quote from my letters, 2016. When a Nobel Prize winner is amazingly wrong about something, it does not help if we claim about him something that he isn't. If we want to prove that we aren't amazingly wrong. We do not understand how creativity works. Once that has been solved, programming it will not be difficult. What if creative is just another way to say not programmable? That is, programmable creativity is an impossible task. In that case, at least some of us, for instance Rosen, have understood for decades how creativity works. It is about infinity, but a different kind of infinity than Cantor's set theory. That is, about complex systems in Rosen's sense that cannot be programmed. But this is another story, and shall be told another time. What if Poincaré recurrence is not inevitable? Probabilistic statements are more relevant than Deutsch and Marlette are comfortable with. And or collapse of the wave function does happen. What if a theory that doesn't explain at the moment simply cannot explain the phenomenon in question? Deutsch criticizes bad philosophy of the because I say so variety. Even though his own approach to constructor theory is built on multiplicity of such claims. Also, since Deutsch addresses evil human activities as committed by those who are missing proper knowledge, it makes sense to wonder how much Deutsch and Malecic, as opposed to the approach encouraged in this article, contribute to systems worldview and quality insights and decision making. A few properties of eigenbehavior Eigenbehavior belongs to possible phenomena. The properties about to be mentioned do not belong to any definition or paper on eigenbehavior per se. But are rather chosen in a way to address what research on constructor theory of eigenbehavior should be about. About science, including observers and systems perspective. Knowledge. Deutsch and Malecic use the term knowledge for describing a different kind of information than commonly understood. It is perhaps something like physical computation as dynamics of form that Dodik Srnković writes about. Deutsch sees von Neumann's approach to the universal constructor as incomplete because it ignores the fact that computations take place within physical objects, and that this notion only physical objects can compute is also a kind of information or knowledge. My commentary, this is the most important contribution of Malecic or Deutsch, that knowledge, information is physical, not an abstraction or emergence from matter, but directly. Note that von Neumann mentioned here was also interested in quantum measurement and did not see it as something his universal constructor should also be capable of. Deutsch admits that his approach does not provide theory of creativity. Or more precisely, he claims that non-scientific approach does that. Still, knowledge does somehow mysteriously participate in branching off different observers involved in quantum experiments. The bifurcation. Collapse of the wave function. The so-called traditional approach is that collapse of the wave function during measurements in quantum mechanics is a real phenomenon. Or that it is at least practical to think this way. The concept of eigenbehavior is about bringing the observer back as a part of reality. Deutsch and Maletto's interpretation of quantum mechanics of choice is the Everett interpretation. Wallace agrees with them and comes to his different conclusion from a similar starting position as this author and referred literature, as this article. Still, a decade after Wallace's contribution and conclusions, Deutsch and Maletto felt the need to start building constructor theory from scratch. For instance, Yeknik-Dugik and Frankon use a similar structural system approach to quantum theory in order to reject instead of support the Everett interpretation. Also, Josephson sees Kastner's work on the possibilist interpretation of quantum mechanics as compatible to his work on structural theory of everything, and this author agrees. So we see here a lot of different turns taking place. I'm especially happy that Stephen Rosen, who we established contact with, is referred to at several positions. And in this criticism of Deutsch Maletto, it's easy to see the complexity level of the question. I also clearer see what is the important discovery made by Deutsch Maletto. The understanding of matter as information directly. Without the action of representation, without the idea of intention versus extension, signifier and signified. Problems that has haunted Western philosophy for millennia. Plato resolved the problem but discovered it led to a reductio in absurdum. It led to infinite regress. Where is the perfect model for an imperfect table? Where does it subside? Aristotle thought he resolved the problem by building form into what he called the real world, saying that the form is a potentiality of the materiality. That solution also leads to paradoxes. Paradoxes that needs to be ignored in order to accept it. I would say it's even worse than that. They are not ignored. They are no longer part of knowledge. And thereby their influence is even greater. It will be indiscernible from reality per se. What Deutsch and Malecic is managing to do is to put an wedge in between what we earlier thought was one whole experience of the real world, and to see that there is an inherited paradox built in, and that is the paradox of polarity dichotomies. Information comes directly from matter. It's not derived. It's not assigned to matter. We do no longer need two spheres. One of the transcendental, otherworldly, non-real, but still necessary ingredients of other worlds or other meanings, or the Platonic cave, or in the case of empiricism, the path that Aristotle opened up. It leads to the Gödelian collapse of the whole thinking. Also, quantum mechanics clearly shows that the dividing line between theory and practice does not hold. That does not mean, however, that theory plus practice makes reality. It's rather that the division from the beginning was randomly put. It simply doesn't make sense. David Deutsch himself said he is an explorer, and that constructor theory and his ideas will most probably change the further it gets developed, because the foundation in this case is more of a movement. Counterfactuals are verbal rather than static Platonic devices. maybe you have a little question here from my dear colleague on this celebration of 1400.
Hello again. And we, as you observed in 1 week ago in a private conversation, you saw that this Molly had written here some phrase, and I saw now this only consists of one phrase, really, one long phrase. Hugely ambitious. Chiara Malletto is the herald for a revolutionary new direction from physics, essential reading for anyone concerned with the future of physics. That's a huge praise from somebody who is probably the number 2 living physicist today after Sir Roger Penrose. So we have both Malletto and Deutsch, they argue, as you said, that information comes from matter. That's a great insight. But then, on the other hand, the information is probably incomplete, since for them there is more information in the other worlds, in the Platonic other worlds. If I understood it correctly, so information is in the matter, so to say, but still you have more information somewhere else. Or how should we put it? And then, so Deutsch puts emphasis on the word theory, and as you observed indirectly, you have theory versus practice. Or to put in a Platonic metaphor, and that Plato himself used in his dialogue. So Socrates speaks about the carpenter and the table. So for Socrates, the table that we see, for instance, here, is inferior to the perfect table that you have up there. So the very practice that we can that is the carpenter and the practice is inferior. So I think he makes a dichotomy there, Deutsch. So, okay, it sounds nice. The theory is everything for Deutsch and Malletto. But then where is the practice? That is the carpenter's work. So the carpenter and, let's say, carpenter himself is placed in up there somewhere in the Platonic words. So what is your comment? Where is the information? Is it only material?
I think could also be that Deutsch and Malletto will leave the other words in the exploration, seeing that it's not viable to have information/matter in other worldly places. That in itself could be problematic for them. My guess is when you do a great discovery, and I would like to make a parallel here to Roger Sperry, who greatly theorized the division between the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. And he made enormous progress, but what he did at the same time was expanding the theory. And by doing that, inevitably, he caused, oddly enough, a lot of errors that is being corrected now by Ian McGilchrist. And that is the plight of the pioneer. You want to construct a whole world theory, and thereby you will go into untrodden paths that takes you no longer. That's one guess I have. I say thank you very much for the very eloquent comment, Kalle. And yeah, thank you all.
Supporting Andreas. Thank you.